I'm about to turn 17 in a couple of days. And as you get older, the questions you get asked at family dinners sort of change over the years. When you're about 5, they ask you, how is preschool? And then you turn 12 and the question changes into, are you in a relationship yet? But then you reach this point in life where everyone you meet asks you the same question. What do you want to study? And this question bothers me so much because I don't know what I want to study. There are so many options and I feel scared to say my choices because then people judge and ask a ton of questions about it, and it's a whole deal, really. However, at these family dinners, I have once in a while, I get to talk to my grandmother. And ever since my grandfather passed away, she's been very talkative. So she's been telling me all kinds of stories from her younghood. She has excellent memory too, so she tells me every little detail. But I remember a time I asked her what she had studied. And she got quiet for a moment. Then she told me she didn't. She didn't go to college. And even though I knew the answer to this, I still asked her why. She told me she wanted to. It just wasn't an option. And then I got quiet. I felt so bad and clueless because there I was complaining about not knowing what to study because I have so many choices, and my grandma didn't even have one. At her family dinners, no one ever asked her, what do you want to study? All her brothers went to college except for her. It wasn't until now, 50 years later, she went to college. Even when she had her whole life figured out and she really didn't have to, she always wanted to study a career. And now she is. At 72, my grandma is studying pedagogy, and I couldn't be prouder. I can say that some things have changed ever since, my grandma was my age. Yes, we have progressed in gender equality. Women back then didn't have the opportunity to go to college. And even back then, women weren't even allowed to vote. It's all thanks to this powerful mindset that women have to learn to live with. This is what has changed history. And even so, gender inequality has not ended. When does it end? It ends when we stop talking about it. When we stop having to give talks like this. When you ask a child what gender inequality is and they don't know what the word even means. That is when it truly ends. All female icons have something in common. They fought for what they believed in. They didn't take no for an answer. Rosalind Franklin was one of them. You may not know who she is, but thanks to her, we now know what a DNA structure looks like. The double helix shape. Well, in her times, women were not recognized as full members of a university. They couldn't get a degree and weren't even allowed in the school cafeteria. But she never let that hold her back. She then went off and became one of the people that changed science forever. Because while everyone else thought she couldn't, she knew she could. Another very remarkable woman, Hedy Lamarr, often known as the most beautiful actress in the world. But she was also a pioneer in technology. She developed a secret communication system to help combat the Nazis during World War II. But when she showed her discovery, the US Navy chose to ignore it. It wasn't until years later that they realized how innovative her findings were, and now all Bluetooth and Wi-Fi systems use her technology. These are just two of many women who have contributed to society all over the world. And they all have one thing in common: their mindset. I've always loved mathematics. I like how they're objective and they teach us all types of metaphors for life. When you need to solve a math problem, and for some reason you need to change the sign in any number, how do you turn a negative number into a positive one? You factorize it by another negative. Because in math we learn the law of signs, which states that negative multiplied by another negative equals positive. So when a no crosses your path, or something is just simply getting in the way of what you want, here's what you need to do. There are 3 steps that I figure to be the key to being unstoppable. Step 1, identifying no's. Nowadays, since we are aware that gender inequality is wrong, it can be hard to identify a limitation that exists just by the simple fact of being a woman. They can come in many ways and can even be unconscious. A sexist comment can be so well disguised, it can even be taken as a compliment. Here in Mexico, it's very common to hear the phrase, "This food is delicious, now you can get married." as if the only reason you would want to be a good chef is to feed your husband. There are many phrases that we say that contribute to gender paradigms. And most of the times we don't say them to offend. We say them because it's become a routine we need to change. Underestimation and prejudgment are other ways gender inequality is expressed. For example, if you go to a restaurant and order the bill, the waiter most likely will hand it to the man at the table because it is assumed that the man has the higher income. In a day-to-day basis, we find ourselves at unfortunate experiences that women just have to learn to live with. The inequality of opportunities is the one I think to be harder to just live with, to just accept. The fact that being a woman means you will not get as many open doors as a man is something impossible for me to acknowledge. The Guardian posted an article on September 29, 2014, that said that not so long ago, in 2011, in the US, for the first time, the women made up slightly more than half the workforce. Now that's incredible news, right? But it's also not that incredible. You see, women are moving into jobs that used to be done by men. But it's sad that there was a time where all jobs were done by men, while women had to stay at home. We can't seem to make ends meet, because while there are more women who are working, they are still being paid less than men. That is patriarchy, the social organization that favors men's power. The most important limitation, though, is the one you put within yourself. It has happened to me plenty of times, where I assume that I should or shouldn't do something just because I'm a girl. This is called internalized misogyny, and it can be very hurtful to you. I used to be so afraid, and I still am afraid, of showing my disapproval for things, because women are thought of as overreactive and hysterical. But if a man gets upset, then he's assertive and tough. It has always bothered me, even when I was little, that people told me to behave like a little princess, to never let my emotions get to me, because nobody likes a mad woman. Once we identify this limitation, we move on to step 2. Use math. As I said before, the law of science needs to be put into action. Negative multiplied by negative equals positive, right? So that translated into life problems, it would be like this. The rejection of your goal, something that is there that is getting in the way of what you want, whether it be your family, your friends, yourself, your environment, that is your negative factor. How are you going to turn that into a positive one? We're going to factorize it by another factor that we are going to call the denial of the limitation, which basically means you're going to say no to that no and turn it into a yes. Why? Because you should never feel stopped by your gender. And by doing step 2, step 3 happens by itself. Move upwards. Don't beat yourself up by things you can't control. Right now, there is no technology advanced enough to know what other people think, much less to change what they think. The change has to start with you. All transcendent women are exceptional because they had something to prove. They are constantly fighting prejudgments and low expectations people make of them, and they use that as fuel for success. People who will never be forgotten and change the world for better never gave up because they knew that what they had to say mattered. So what you have to say also matters. I know it can be tough, but sometimes what may seem like a barrier is actually your motivation. Think of every time you felt tiny, every time you felt questioned or misunderstood, and channel that into strength. I remember a year ago, I was in school, nothing special, but I had this class that completely changed my perspective of life. I was in my social science class with my brilliant teacher, and she was talking to us about the laws of dialectics. And I found them to be so intriguing and interesting, truly perfect. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, they are these 4 laws stated by Marx and Engels that everything in our reality must follow. 1 being the law of dialectical change, 2 being the law of reciprocal action, the 3rd one is the law of contradiction, and the 4th one is the law of quantity changes into quality, also known as the law of progress through leaps. Now, I don't want to bore you by giving you a whole lecture of what this means. But what matters right now is the one that stayed with me. Law number 4, progress through leaps, which basically states that a big change is formed by a small series of gradual changes until all alterations arise into a sudden jump. So to make a real difference, all it really takes is a small leap. Standing up for yourself, that's a small leap. Going to college, even if your family questions you, that's another small leap. And so they start to assemble like puzzle pieces, and a new reality starts to emerge. It's not easy. Even if even if it's a tiny jump, you still have to lift off the ground and beat gravity for a second. But it's a leap of faith. And once you do, and once you're ready, you'll change the world. Thank you.